Ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege for me to be amongst healthcare professionals. I am only a beneficiary of your services, not a participant in your industry. And I'm here because Sangeeta and Dr. Reddy wanted me to give a little context to the whole issue of talent and skills. Not because I understand your sector well, but because I've been involved in the skill challenges of a couple of sectors, most prominently the IT sector, and also more recently the financial sector. So what I really want to do is to take a few minutes to reflect on the challenges that I think would apply to every sector, and therefore the healthcare sector, looking at our own experience, and also perhaps some views on how this matter could be addressed. So first and foremost, and in going through the papers, the document became more obvious that if we look at the need or the gaps, which is the stimulus for any response for building talent, the issues seem very, very similar across a large number of sectors in this country. And so whichever way we look at it, I was looking at two pieces of data which are referred to very often. The WHO report of 2006, which became a basis for informing the skills mission, Prime Minister's skills mission, of which I was a part. But I was trying to do a little comparison that between us, where we stood as a country, and the average of many developed countries, just looking at ratios. Interestingly, so far as pharmacists and midwives are concerned, the ratio is roughly 1:1. Physicians, we need 5 times the number on a per capita basis than what we have. Nurses, we need 15 times the number. Dentists, we need 20 times. And lab technicians, we need 100 times more, just to get the order of magnitude. Another study, partly informed by this data alone, which was part of the National Skill Development Corporation studies by IMAX, they were looking at roughly how many we will have in 2008, which is the year they did the measurement, and looking at 2022, which is one way that we are trying to look at 75 years after independence and so on, that how many we have and how many we will need. Interestingly, the ratio of pharmacists remains roughly 1:1, which means we roughly have the number of pharmacists we will need even in 2022. We need 4 times the number of physicians. We need 15 times the number of nurses. We need 10 times the number of dentists, and we need 30 times the number of lab technicians. So both these things indicate to us the scale of problem, the order of magnitude problem. It's not a marginal or incremental problem. So the stimulus of this need doesn't need very fine resolution. We don't need to do a lot of studies. The problem is so large that even if we were to do all kind of response to the stimulus, we won't be able to meet the numbers. So the limitation is a supply side limitation, not a demand side issue. It's just enough to say that the problem is just monumental. So what is happening on the supply side of the talent equation? So one thing we notice is that there is an over-regulation in education across all sectors. Every sector in this country in education, and I would think that medical sector is probably far more tightly regulated than most other sectors. Look at engineering education. In 1998, there were 90,000 seats for engineering. That number has gone 20 times up. Not because government laid out the money, but they became, in a sense, laissez-faire. They said, let the private sector come in. And this is not for profit private sector, it's not for profit. higher education in this country, by law, cannot be for profit. So we've seen that kind of supply side response. In terms of MBA colleges, that number is also about 25 times more than the number of institutions we had in the mid-90s. And when the dot-com bust happened in 2002, we saw a period when the supply exceeded demand briefly. But since the last 3 years, we've had a situation of excessive supply. 40% of engineering seats this year have gone empty. So the first point I want to make is the market is at work, even in a reasonably regulated area, without having proper regulation. That's one part of the response equation. The other part is that we, as a country, have taken, we have recognized the issue, and while the formal education part of it is the most constrained, the degrees for doctors, but on the skill part of the equation, or the continuum, there is a response which was triggered by the current Prime Minister when he created the Skills Council. And some of us who were involved with it started off doing the demand-supply thing and realized it was a waste of time. There was just too much to do on supply. We shouldn't worry too much about demand. And the first response was the creation of the National Skills Development Corporation, and one of the panelists will be joining us, Dilip, who's done a remarkable piece of work. And we have moved very rapidly across sectors, and healthcare also is one of the sectors where work is happening, is that we have started building sector skills councils, patterned on the experience of UK, patterned on the experience of Australia, somewhat informed by Germany, less so. But the idea is, how do we engage the academic world with the delivery sector, with industry or government hospitals for that matter? So how do we start bridging the gap between those who supply talent and those who need talent? So a structural connection through these sector skills councils is falling into place, and we're beginning to see the first reports which are more authentic on the demand-supply equation. But more than that, we are beginning to see through the Sector Skills Council and now the NSDC, we are beginning to see the spawning of a very large number of startups, of people who are wanting to get involved in building skills. But the reform is very limited, and I hope to hear a bit about reforms. I don't know whether people will talk about it, but 2008, we had, in one of the sessions, talked about the need for 3 kinds of reforms in building talent. The first are what I would term as the administrative reforms, which means, can people get in and out of the activity or business of delivering education? So the entry and exit, freedom to enter and exit, the most fundamental of the administrative reforms. We are not very close to that yet, at least in the formal degree giving area. It's very badly constrained, and healthcare is much worse than even engineering and management. So entry and exit is one basic area where reform is required. The second is academic reform, what to teach. We have archaic laws even today. We have very funny considerations where we are teaching stuff which has no relevance whatsoever in today's time. And I'm not talking of healthcare. Healthcare, perhaps you have very many horizontal mechanisms to train your doctors and so on. But in engineering, in technology, in finance, in such subjects, curriculum is outdated because there are far too many rigidities in the system. So academic reform basically says, just like you permit the IITs and the IIMs to build their own curricula, to build their own content, we have to give freedom and let 1,000 flowers bloom. The third is financial reform, and this is about who pays and how do you set the fee. So all these 3 areas need very radical reform, And the activity of the NSDC, which is the public-private partnership, is to try and mediate in this space and push into the edges. And we are making progress, but I must say, not very much of progress. So we would like to hear about the panels about what the experiences are. Finally, I want to touch on, and I expect we'll hear some comments on what could be the discontinuities. What could be the unexpected things that happened that shake up this equation? And I want to touch on three as I close. The first of them is technology. Now, I think all of you sitting in this room understand the role of technology in healthcare better than I do. But all of us who understand technology are also getting surprised by the pace at which technology is moving. So technologists earlier had control of technology. Now that control has shifted with things like mobility, with things like easy to use devices, mobile devices, easy to use interfaces, the control has shifted to end users. And the end users are creating apps, as we call them, which are very much a part of the intervention. So technology is actually interestingly gone out of control, and I'm very happy about that, because it's transforming, it's creating very much lower cost and efficient mechanism to do whatever we do. The second is data, the capturing of data. Every one of us generates an enormous amount of data in a day with a mobile phone, for example. And if you're busy taking pictures or taking videos, you won't realize how much quantity of data is being captured. And in your hospital, there are the number of devices that are working on each patient and gathering data are increasing exponentially. So the amount of data being gathered, one measure was that every 11 hours it doubles in the world, the amount of data. So it's again gone to a level which is difficult to comprehend. And therefore the whole field of what we term as big data is how to capture this data and how to analyze and process is very fundamental, and it's very fundamental to healthcare as well, as we get into genetics and understanding of it. So that's one disruption which will help us perhaps solve this problem. The other is a social disruption, and that you look at the young of today, the millennials as we call them. The millennials, or people who were teenagers in the great boom decade of the 90s, are far more socially sensitive and far more socially engaged than the previous generation. So their willingness to participate in solving problems of society pleasantly surprises all of us. So this is another unexpected thing which is coming to the fore. The third is not as much a new trend, but it's a revival of the past, which is of traditional medicine. I was seeing a full-page ad today, which many of you may have seen, which is on Ayush, traditional medicine. To me, I think this represents the third discontinuity. As I was trying to gather information and data on this sector, and I was talking to a few friends in your field, and I was saying, how many professionals are involved in this sector of healthcare which is below the radar? They said at least as many as in the regular healthcare sector, regular as they called it. And so therefore maybe 5 million or more who are not being counted in the talent pool that we look at. And we see a strong revival of Eastern styles of medicine, pretty much as the center of gravity of economic shift from West to East. This to me also represents a huge opportunity, and many of the progressive hospitals are looking at integrating traditional medicine because it's not the other, but it's the mainstay. So these three forces of disruption, I think, are going to put a spin into all the plans that we make, hopefully positive spins. And in our panel, I'm looking forward to hearing some comments on these issues, and I'm as much, if not more, of a participant or a delegate as we listen to this very distinguished group of panelists. So with that, I'd like to hand over to the chair and the anchor of the panel.